At exactly 9 a.m., the duty officer at the police station was already overwhelmed with reports and case filings from local residents. Kay Phuong reported that her husband, Lan Nguyen Kiem, the deputy head of the Department of Internal Medicine and Rheumatology, currently employed at the city hospital, had gone missing. He had not returned home the entire previous night. Lan Nguyen Kiem, 49 years old, was known for being meticulous and considerate. Never before had he left home without informing his wife and children. Adding to her concern, on the evening of March 22, Kiem had told his wife that he was attending a quarterly work review party at the hospital. He wasn't scheduled for a night shift, so after eating and drinking, he was expected to come straight home. However, the night passed, and then the early hours of the morning, yet her husband neither returned home nor could he be reached. Early that morning, Kay Phuong and her daughter went to the hospital to inquire about his whereabouts. There, his colleagues confirmed that after the party ended, Kiem had driven his car away but had not returned to the hospital for any duties or stayed overnight. This left Kay Phuong and her daughter increasingly worried and desperate for assistance from the police. The duty officer who took their report was somewhat surprised and puzzled by the urgency of their reaction. After all, Lan Nguyen Kiem was an adult man. More than that, he was the deputy head of a prestigious department in a major city hospital, wielding power and status. Kay Phuong repeatedly emphasized that after decades of marriage, she knew her husband's habits well. Except for his shifts at the hospital, he had never displayed suspicious behavior or gone missing in such a manner. Even if he had been too drunk to return home, he would at least have called or messaged them. But this time, even his phone was unreachable. This was completely out of character for Kiem. The Ngoc Lam City police, recognizing the family's extreme distress, decided to dispatch officers to the hospital for further verification. Indeed, during interviews at the hospital, staff members confirmed that after the quarterly work review party ended, Kiem had driven his new luxury car away from the hospital. He had not stayed for any post-party activities with colleagues. It was reported that during the party, Lan Nguyen Kiem drank a significant amount of alcohol and appeared to be in high spirits. He showed no signs of any unusual behavior. Therefore, the Ngoc Lam police speculated that on his way home from the hospital, the deputy head of the department might have been involved in a traffic accident due to excessive drinking. As a result, the authorities immediately issued a notice to the traffic police, requesting their cooperation to check and verify any traffic accidents that occurred in the area on the night of March 22. At this point, the police data system had been fully integrated, allowing the review and verification process to proceed quickly. The results indicated that Lan Nguyen Kiem's expensive, new luxury car was not listed among the vehicles involved in any reported traffic accidents that night. However, there remained one plausible possibility. Due to his heavy drinking at the hospital's party, Lan Nguyen Kiem might have decided to spend the night at a hotel or a friend's or relative's house without informing his wife and family. Given the unusual nature of this case, mobilizing a large-scale search by law enforcement would be unreasonable. Therefore, the leadership of the Ngoc Lam Police Department decided to issue a temporary notice to local hotels and inns to look for any trace of him. Apart from this matter, the police force was already under significant pressure from numerous other tasks. Yet, none of them could have anticipated that this case would mark the beginning of a horrifying murder and dismemberment case that would shock the public and dominate the city's media for a long time to come. At 5 p.m. the same day, March 23, the Criminal Investigation Division of the Ngoc Lam Police received another extremely serious report. The caller was identified as Xiao Chu, a 25-year-old nurse working at the city hospital in Ngoc Lam. She lived in the residential complex designated for medical staff. At around 4:30 p.m., while showering and preparing for her night shift on March 23, Xiao Chu discovered that her apartment's drains and toilet were clogged and spewing foul-smelling waste back into her bathroom. Despite trying various methods to clear the blockage, the slimy, revolting mixture kept bubbling up, spreading across her bathroom floor as if it were mocking her. The young, beautiful nurse, covering her mouth and nose, could only curse in frustration. The most horrifying discovery came when she used water to flush the drain, only to notice several objects that resembled human finger joints, floating among the nauseating muck. Horrified by the sight before her, Xiao Chu immediately ran downstairs to inform the residential complex manager and requested help to clean up. Despite the seriousness of her account and her unusual behavior, the manager simply laughed and replied dismissively, "You've been working too much at the hospital, and now you're just scaring yourself. There's no way a human fingertip could end up in a toilet bowl." Ridiculous. After some back and forth, they agreed on a cleaning fee of 100 yuan, and the manager reluctantly grabbed his cleaning tools and headed upstairs to her apartment. However, as soon as he entered the bathroom and lifted the toilet lid, his face turned pale. He bolted out of the apartment, retching and yelling like a chicken being slaughtered. Just as Xiao Chu had described, inside the slimy, floating mess were actual human finger joints, dismembered and horrifyingly grotesque. Faced with this shocking discovery and the young nurse's distressed state, the Ngoc Lam City police, along with forensic experts, were immediately dispatched to the scene. In just a few minutes of professional inspection and evaluation, the forensic team concluded that the objects Xiao Chu and the residential manager had found were indeed parts of a human body. Specifically, they identified a left ring finger and 2 joints of a right index finger belonging to an adult. These had been dismembered into smaller parts. Given the nature of the crime scene, the investigation team promptly sealed off the entire residential complex and sent a report back to the Ngoc Lam Police Headquarters, requesting further instructions. Additional personnel and technical equipment were mobilized to assist with the investigation. The residential complex, designated for the medical staff of the city hospital, consisted of 5 floors with a total of 30 apartments. Built nearly 20 years ago, the infrastructure had significantly deteriorated, particularly the plumbing and electrical systems, which had been constructed and handed over in a rather basic state. The drainage pipes connecting to the bathrooms and kitchens were simple and interconnected. It didn't take long for the investigators to determine that the drain in Xiao Chu's 3rd-floor apartment shared a connection with the drainage systems of 2 upper-floor apartments, units 403 and 503 on the 4th and 5th floors, respectively. Given the building's design, it was highly likely that the clogged waste originated from one of the upper apartments, rather than backing up from below. While investigators worked with the complex manager to gather information about the occupants of the upper apartments, forensic experts and technicians began dismantling and inspecting the drainage pipes. As expected, their findings confirmed the suspicion. The pipes contained numerous pieces of soft tissue, strongly believed to be human body parts, which were tightly lodged and clogging the system. In addition to pieces of raw flesh cut into chunks about the size of half a hand, the forensic team also discovered fragments of bone that had been chopped into small pieces. Astonishingly, some of the meat had been cooked, displaying a completely altered state. With decades of experience handling criminal cases, the investigators had never encountered a situation as haunting as this one. It was both excessively cruel and inhumane. Upon being asked to verify the ownership of apartments 403 and 503, which shared the drainage system on the upper floors, the residential complex manager reported that neither of these apartments had been used in a long time. However, during their records check, the investigators made a startling discovery. The person listed as the tenant of apartment 403 was none other than Lan Qiam, the deputy head of the internal medicine and rheumatology department at Ngoc Lam City Hospital, who had mysteriously gone missing the previous night. This revelation raised significant suspicions among the investigators. From prior information, they knew that Lan Qiam was financially well off, immensely wealthy, even. Why, then, would he rent an old, run-down apartment in a dilapidated building? When asked about it, his wife and family were equally shocked. They had never heard him mention this property, not even once. With permission from their superiors, the investigators immediately proceeded to break into and inspect apartments 403 and 503. What they found was peculiar. Despite claims from the manager that these units had been unused for a long time, the two apartments displayed starkly contrasting conditions. Apartment 403 reeked of medical-grade cleaning solutions mixed with an overwhelming scent of perfume. The furnishings were minimal but impeccably clean, extraordinarily clean. This stood in sharp contrast to apartment 503 on the floor above, where dust and cobwebs blanketed everything. This observation strengthened the investigators' belief that apartment 403 was directly linked to the gruesome case. It defied logic that a long-abandoned unit could remain spotless. Normally, such a space would accumulate dust, insects, and mold, like apartment 503. But apartment 403 appeared to have been meticulously cleaned, rearranged, and prepared. If no one was living there, why had it been cleaned? What was the purpose behind such efforts? Particularly striking was the bathroom, which had been scrubbed to a gleaming shine, as if it were brand new. The water meter also showed signs of recent and substantial usage. In the kitchen, the police discovered a newly unpacked and used set of kitchen tools, which included 2 plastic cutting boards with a 50 cm diameter, 2 thick cleavers designed for chopping bones, 1 thin-bladed slicing knife. All 3 knives had numerous chips along their blades, suggesting they had been used to chop or cut through something hard. What raised further suspicion was that, despite the cleaned and used state of the knives and cutting boards, the kitchen contained no pots, pans, bowls, or any cooking ingredients. This led to an unsettling question. If there were no cooking utensils or ingredients, what had the occupant of apartment 403 been using the knives and cutting boards for? Were they simply chopping food to be cooked elsewhere? That seemed illogical and highly improbable. When inspecting the bedroom, the investigators found that it, too, had been recently cleaned and meticulously arranged. However, beneath the bed, near the wall, they discovered a thin white face towel that was stuck there, along with a luxurious brown leather belt with a metallic buckle. When they unfolded the mysterious towel, the investigators were shocked to find it stained with what appeared to be blood, freshly dried. Although they didn't want to jump to conclusions, at this point, Ngoc Lam, the deputy head of the internal medicine and rheumatology department at Ngoc Lam City Hospital, had become the prime suspect in this disturbing case. Upon receiving the notification from the investigation team, Ngoc Phuong, Ngoc Lam's wife, hurried to the scene with her daughter. But whatever faint hope they carried was immediately dashed when they identified the leather belt as the birthday gift Phuong had given her husband on his 49th birthday. However, everything remained circumstantial. To ensure the investigation stayed on the right track and avoided wasting resources, the case now hinged entirely on the DNA test results from the forensic center. While waiting for the results, the task force and investigators quickly summoned all the residents of the apartment building, as well as the manager, to headquarters for questioning. Strange details began to emerge. Most residents stated they rarely saw anyone visiting apartment 403. They couldn't imagine someone as wealthy and prestigious as Ngoc Lam, a deputy department head, frequenting such a run-down, old apartment. Some neighbors near apartment 403 reported hearing faint sounds of a door opening and closing around 11:15 p.m. on March 22. However, they dismissed it, thinking the noise came from another unit. Additionally, Xiao Chu, the nurse living in the apartment below, mentioned she hadn't noticed anything unusual the previous night. She had spent the entire day at the hospital, only returning home in the evening to eat, bathe, and rest. She slept through the night until the following morning. At around 10 a.m. on March 23, Xiao Chu recalled hearing chopping and banging noises from the floor above. However, since it was around lunchtime, she assumed it was just someone preparing food and didn't think much of it. Meanwhile, the building manager, when questioned, displayed suspicious behavior. After some hesitation, he finally admitted, Ngoc Lam had rented apartment 403 for over 4 years. He had explicitly asked the manager not to disclose this to anyone. The manager elaborated. Ngoc Lam was a wealthy and powerful man. As a fellow man, I understood the situation. He used the apartment as a secret rendezvous spot to bring his mistresses away from prying eyes. He only came here at night. Usually on the evenings he claimed to have night shifts at the hospital. By the time he arrived, the neighbors were already asleep, and he'd leave at dawn before anyone was awake. That's why no one ever noticed. The plot thickened when new information surfaced. Kei Fuong reported that 90,000 yuan had been withdrawn from her husband's bank account at 11:58 p.m. on March 22. Bank records revealed that the money was transferred to an account belonging to Li Fuong Bin, a 25-year-old nurse at Ngoc Lam City Hospital. She was currently an intern in the internal medicine and rheumatology department, under the supervision of Lin Nguyen Kiem. Li Fuong Bin was immediately summoned for questioning. She testified that she and Lin Nguyen Kiem were from the same hometown, and he had always been supportive and caring toward her. The 90,000 yuan was a loan from him to help her pay for her mother's medical treatment, as her mother was gravely ill back home. On the night of March 22, she had a night shift at the hospital and stayed in her department the entire time, as recorded in the duty log. Li Fuong Bin's testimony seemed plausible, but to the investigators, several inconsistencies raised suspicion. First, while it was understandable for Lin Nguyen Kiem to help a subordinate, why would he transfer a large sum of 90,000 yuan close to midnight instead of at a more conventional time? Second, there was no agreement or legal documentation to formalize the loan. Even if it was a loan between compatriots, this was highly irregular, especially for someone as meticulous and status-conscious as Lin Nguyen Kiem. Third, if this was merely an act of goodwill, why didn't Lin Nguyen Kiem inform his wife and family about it? Meanwhile, the Forensic Center of the Ngoc Lam City Police Department sent a critical report. The DNA test results from the samples collected in the drainage pipes of Xiao Chu's apartment and apartment 403 revealed a definitive match with Lin Nguyen Kiem's DNA. However, this was not the final result. The blood sample found on the towel stuck under the bed yielded an entirely different DNA match. In other words, apartment 403 contained not only biological traces of the victim but also blood from a second individual. Another significant detail came to light during forensic analysis. Technicians discovered a foreign fingerprint on the leather belt belonging to Lin Nguyen Kiem, retrieved from under the bed. This fingerprint did not belong to the victim, nor did it match that of his wife, Ngoc Kei Fuong. This discovery marked a turning point in the investigation, presenting a puzzle that demanded resolution. Why? Consider this. Would an ordinary person touch someone else's belt without reason? Only someone with a close, personal relationship would likely have done so. According to the residential manager's earlier testimony, Lin Nguyen Kiem was not a particularly virtuous man. He had secretly hidden his affairs from his family and engaged in extramarital relationships for years. The most plausible explanation was that the mysterious fingerprint belonged to a suspect. Based on this deduction, the investigation team submitted the fingerprint for further analysis to identify the individual. After relentless efforts, the investigators finally discovered the owner of the enigmatic fingerprint. By now, perhaps you've formed your own theories about who it could belong to, haven't you? Indeed, as many might suspect, the fingerprint on the leather belt of Deputy Head Lin Nguyen Kiem belonged to none other than nurse Li Fuong Bin. However, when summoned for the second time by the police, Li Fuong Bin adamantly maintained that she had no involvement in the murder and dismemberment of Lin Nguyen Kiem. When asked to explain why her fingerprint was found on the victim's leather belt, Bin stated that she frequently cleaned the private office of the deputy head as a gesture of gratitude for his support and assistance. She explained that she must have accidentally touched the belt during one of these occasions since Lin Nguyen Kiem always changed into his hospital uniform at work. Furthermore, she asserted that she owed a great deal to Lin Nguyen Kiem and was indebted to him for his kindness and help. It would be unthinkable for her to harm someone who had been so generous to her. However, when confronted by forensic experts who requested a blood sample to compare with the bloodstains found on the towel at the scene, her demeanor changed dramatically. She began trembling, her confident facade shattered. Her hands clenched tightly, and she vehemently refused to allow any physical contact from the police. Bin became a completely different person, sobbing, clutching her head, and repeatedly exclaiming, "It's not my fault. It's not my fault. He forced me. He brought this upon himself. I'm not wrong. I'm not guilty. I had no choice but to do it." Her reactions, fear, and statements during this breakdown revealed the stark truth. After being reassured and calmed, Lee Phuong Bin finally confessed, admitting that she was the one who killed and dismembered Deputy Head Lin Nguyen Kiem on the night of March 22. However, when questioned about the reasons and motives that led her to commit such a brutal act against a compatriot and benefactor, she broke down again, sobbing uncontrollably and unable to regain composure. Lee Phuong Bin was born in 1995. At the time of her arrest, she was only 25 years old. She hailed from Bac Bok district in Ngoc Lam City. Her family was extremely poor, with 2 younger siblings still in high school. From a young age, Bin was an excellent student and dreamed of becoming a distinguished teacher, standing proudly at the head of a classroom in her hometown. However, this seemingly simple dream was completely shattered during her final year of high school. As she was preparing for the university entrance exams, her mother suddenly collapsed while harvesting grain in the fields. Initially, the family thought it was just heatstroke or exhaustion, possibly low blood pressure. However, after being taken to the hospital, doctors diagnosed her mother with cervical cancer. This news struck like a bolt of lightning. The family, already struggling with poverty, now had to bear the additional burden of medical expenses and treatment. Their circumstances became more dire than ever. Despite her deep love for her children and her wish not to disrupt Bin's future, her mother could not alter reality. Money doesn't appear out of thin air, and her father's strength alone could not support the entire family. Ultimately, faced with such adversity, Bin decided to abandon her dream of becoming a teacher and, following her father's advice, applied to medical school in hopes of learning how to treat her mother's illness and provide for the family. However, when filling out her application, Bin realized that the cost and duration of training in general medicine were both prohibitively high. In contrast, nursing was a shorter and more affordable program with better employment prospects. After careful consideration, she decided to pursue nursing, driven by the desire to graduate quickly and help her family. As planned, Bin excelled in her studies and graduated with honors at the end of 2019. She spent 2 months at home helping care for her mother and tutoring her younger siblings for their exams before beginning her job search. 3 major hospitals in Ngoc Lam offered her positions. The first hospital offered double the average salary but required a 15-year work contract and had an intense workload. The second hospital offered a moderate salary, a stable 9-to-5 schedule, and less pressure. The third hospital offered the lowest pay but was closest to home and had flexible working hours. After careful consideration, Bin chose the third hospital because her primary goal was to stay close to home to care for her mother and support her family. In her early days at work, Lee Phuong Bin faced numerous challenges. Female colleagues often bullied and mocked her as a country bumpkin, fearing that her exceptional skills might threaten their positions. Despite her efforts to endure quietly, Bin became a target of scrutiny and envy. Her fair complexion, attractive appearance, gentle demeanor, and eagerness to learn drew attention from many male colleagues, who frequently encouraged and supported her. This, in turn, exacerbated the resentment from her female co-workers. Without many friends and living in isolation, Bin often turned to her old phone and social media to seek solace and connection. One night during a quiet shift with no patients, a few male colleagues invited her to play an online game. This game allowed players to convert winnings into real money. Initially, Bin played out of curiosity and experienced a string of big wins. The money she earned so effortlessly made life feel significantly easier. Her winnings allowed her to buy better medicine for her mother, send gifts to her siblings, and spend more freely. However, her streak of luck didn't last long. As she continued to play, her losses began to mount. Desperate to recover her losses, she borrowed money using credit cards and even resorted to high-interest loans from loan sharks. The mounting debt left her with no way out, and her life spiraled into despair. During this period of crisis, Nguyen Kiem appeared as a savior. He offered to lend her 50,000 yuan to pay off her debts without asking for any collateral. However, in return, he demanded that she become his secret mistress. Trapped and with no other options, Bin reluctantly agreed. Their relationship gradually turned toxic. Not only did Nguyen Kiem force her to serve him, but he also compelled her to entertain his business partners during drinking parties. The breaking point came when he demanded that she bear him a son to carry on his lineage. This was the last straw, and her resentment and hatred toward him reached their peak. On the evening of March 22, Nguyen Kiem summoned Bin to apartment 403 to serve him. Despite explaining that she was on her menstrual cycle, he insisted that she come. While being coerced, all the anger and humiliation she had suppressed for so long boiled over. After Nguyen Kiem fell asleep, drunk from the evening's revelry, Bin decided to exact her revenge. Using a phone charging cable from the bedside table, she strangled him to death. Afterward, she secretly transferred 90,000 yuan from his account to hers, intending to send it back home for her mother's treatment and to support her siblings. That entire night, she lay next to Nguyen Kiem's lifeless body, unable to sleep. The following morning, she returned to the hospital to establish an alibi and began devising a plan to dispose of the body. She spent the night researching ways to dispose of a corpse and erase evidence as thoroughly as possible. After considering several methods, Bin ultimately decided on what she believed to be the cleanest and most efficient approach. On the early morning of March 23, while her neighbors were still asleep, she returned to apartment 403 with pre-prepared tools, including a new set of knives and cutting boards. The disposal process began. She dragged Nguyen Kiem's heavy body into the bathroom. Using the knives and cutting board, she dismembered the body into smaller pieces and attempted to push the parts into the drainage system. To eliminate traces, she used a large quantity of medical disinfectant stolen from the hospital. Everything seemed to be going according to plan, but the old plumbing system couldn't handle such a large volume of waste. Body parts and other materials clogged the pipes, causing a severe blockage that eventually led to the discovery. At the police station, faced with DNA evidence and witness testimonies, Bin confessed to the crime. However, when asked about her motive, she broke down, crying hysterically. "I didn't want to do this. I was forced. He turned my life into a living hell." She recounted the immense suffering and humiliation she endured, being turned into a sexual slave by Nguyen Kiem over an extended period. Despite her confession, investigators still had lingering doubts. Through crime scene reenactments, they observed that dismembering and disposing of Nguyen Kiem's body would have been nearly impossible for Bin to accomplish alone. Even intoxicated and exhausted, Nguyen Kiem was a physically robust man. Subduing him as easily as Bin claimed seemed implausible. Investigators theorized Li Fuong Bin may not have acted alone. A third party might have assisted her in committing the crime. When questioned about the possibility of an accomplice, Bin consistently denied it. She insisted that she acted in a state of panic and lost control, which explained gaps in her memory about certain details. On November 30, 2020, the Intermediate People's Court of Ngoc Lam City sentenced Li Fuong Bin to death for murder and body disposal. The Whispers of the Moonlight thanks you for your time and attention.